Well, it's the stroke of 10:01, so I'm going to open the meeting. My name's John Kelsey. I'm with Lancaster Area Woodturners, who sponsors the Thursday morning coffee hour, and this is number 40 in the series. We are recording so that we can post the video afterward. The posted video, as you might know, we cut out anything that's not about wood turning, including long stalls while people try to share their screens. So it's actually a little brisker than the actual event, but you're welcome to go to our website, lancastereawoodturners.org, and review any of the videos back to number 27 when we started to record them. This meeting is open, although sponsored by Lancaster Area Woodturners. It's open to any woodturner who finds the link and would like to join us. And today we are going to have two different discussions, presentations and discussions. First of all, Kai from Germany is going to show us his one of his slideshows on making a 12-inch sphere. And after we digest that, we're going to turn to Ernie, who's made a rather brilliant little video about bowl gouges and what's the difference between them. And I usually have very little patience for watching videos, but when he sent me the link the other day, I couldn't stop watching it, which I found to be a big surprise. So before I go to Kay, I see somebody down here, Kathy Gower. Are you with us, Kathy? You want to turn your video on?
I am. I'm actually on here with my brother Jeff Carroll, who's been with you before.
Okay. Well, we'd love to see your smiling faces. Same with you, Bob Mathers. There you are. Thank you. You're on a phone, it looks like, I see.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, good morning and welcome
Good morning.
By the way, John, I just found a book on my bookshelf the other day.
Oh, yes, that's Ernie's book.
I said, gee, I recognize that guy. The picture was a little bit younger inside, though. So
that was published during my tenure at Fox Chapel, my brief tenure there. So there you go.
We're not needed.
Kai, you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So, can I share the screen?
You can. I'm going to put the spotlight on you. Although it's probably not necessary. There we go. Very good.
So, let's see what I can enlarge that. Okay, now the PowerPoint should have started. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go for it.
Okay, you said it's a sphere I'm talking about. I called it a ball, but sphere sounds better, I have to admit. So, so this is about turning a wooden sphere. Yeah. Okay. That's the piece of wood I worked with. One of my neighbors, he felled a pine tree and he gave part of the trunk to me. So this piece is rather big for my lathe. I mean, it fits on there, but normally I turn smaller pieces of wood. And so the first thing was to get it round. So I used my chainsaw to cut it into kind of a cylindrical, roughly cylindrical shape before I put it on my lathe. Then I used a kind of a wooden cardboard and put it onto the piece, and then I marked the center. So that is about finding the center. After this, I tried to drill a hole into the wood. And the problem is these Forstner bits only have a very short point, and the wood was still wet. And when I started drilling, the drill started wandering away from the point that I had marked previously. And the whole idea about drilling this hole is that I wanted to use my step center that is next to the Forstner bit. And I thought if I drill a hole in there, it will be a little bit safer than just putting the point or the end of the step center directly on the wood. So
what was the wood, Kai? It looks like pine.
Yeah, it is pine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to sink it in a little bit so that it can't or couldn't jump that easily out of my lathe. Yeah, so the problem or the way to solve this was I drilled a hole of the same diameter. Here it's 22 millimeters, so a bit less than an inch, into this scrap wood, and then I placed it so that the center was in the middle of my hole, held it down to the trunk or the workpiece, and then I drilled through it. And now the drill bit couldn't wander away from the center anymore. That is a good thing if you have to drill holes using Forstner bits, and maybe you already have a smaller hole in your workpiece and you want to have a bigger hole drilled with a Forstner bit that kind of goes over the smaller hole. Then you can also use something like this to center the bit, because the Forstner bit always needs the point to be centered. Okay, after this was solved, I put the piece onto my lathe, and the lathe isn't that small, but still it looks quite a big piece, and I started it really slowly. Is there a question? I have got some noise. No. Yeah, if you have questions, just feel free to ask them. I'll try to answer them. So, okay, just go on. Yeah. Now, before we go there, I started roughing the workpiece now, or the piece of wood now, and I had a problem that the piece started slipping. So when I attacked it with my roughing out gouge, it started slipping, and the speed really went down. Question: what do you normally do if a workpiece starts slipping?
Generally tighten it up.
Yeah, tighten the hand wheel of the tailstock. And that's what I did. And I tightened it several times. And then later, when I took it out of the lathe, I saw what had happened. And that's the next picture. The step center acted like, or had acted like a drill, and made this groove into my wood until the flat piece of the step center here, or the flat of the step center, touched the wood, and then the step center couldn't go any deeper into the wood, and I tightened the hand wheel again and again and again, and the only thing that made my workpiece turn was the friction between my step center and the workpiece. That's why it is burned here, and I'm happy that the lathe is quite heavy and has got big ball bearings, and so they could take the pressure that I put up, and I finished actually turning the workpiece before I realized this. But of course, I should have used another way to hold the wood on this side, because the step center was just too small in wet wood to do that.
I would thought a 4-spur center would have done better.
Yeah. So there are better ways to do that. I just wanted to try it out, and I think I had seen something like that before in a YouTube video or so. But I guess the ball was smaller than mine, and maybe the wood wasn't wet. So I ran into that problem. Right. So anyway, finally I roughed it out. Here's the roughing out gouge, and it's quite a big one. So that worked fine. And I measured the diameter, which was about that's 30 centimeters, 31 centimeters or something like that. So it's about what did we say?
12 inches.
10, 12 inches.
12 inches.
Like that. Yeah. Okay. So now some math. If you look at the circle here and enclose it with these lines, it's only a little bit of wood that you need to take away to make it into a round shape. And you can actually calculate the length of this by multiplying 0.4142 with the diameter, the one I had measured before. And then you get the length from here to here.
You're basically drawing an octagon, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. An octagon in which my sphere fits, yeah. And then I put my tool rest at an angle of 45 degrees here. And you can see that in the next picture, what that was good for. After marking out the length that I had calculated, which is from here to here, and that is the total length that I need for my sphere, I wanted to start making it into a sphere shape. And of course, I could have cut it a little bit shorter. It's quite a bit of wood on the left and on the left and on the right that has to be turned away. But I always like to be a bit on the safe side. So with the hand tool rest at 45 degrees, you can see that here. I just turned away wood until I had the length from here to here, also from here to here. I could have measured it or tried to measure it here, but it's a bit difficult to measure this length or to mark this length here, because that's the stub of the wood is in the way for measuring. So that is the 1/2 of my sphere then, and I did that. Yeah. Then I measured the. Okay, I copied the this shape here. Yeah, and checked whether that was about round here. So it's a little bit too much wood here and also on this side, but at that point I didn't care about that.
So in effect, there you're using the other method of turning it to a cylinder and then reversing it, turning it by 90 degrees and using that silhouette to turn to. You're using the gauge to reproduce the shape of the cylinder on in the other axis.
Yeah, because it's quite heavy for re-chucking it if you want to change axis.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to hold it then in some kind of cup centers or something like this. And with a heavy workpiece like that, it's not that easy. So
no, I think that's a good way to do it. I think you've done it in a good way.
Yeah. So this the right half is already finished. Next, I kind of turned away the wood until I got my length for the bow sphere here, and then I removed this bit of wood, and so that was kind of the pre-turned sphere, and it looks a bit like an egg, so it's still a little bit too much wood here and a little bit too much wood here, but that again was for staying on the safe side. And when I turn wood in my workshop, I normally put up a curtain so that the shavings don't get everywhere. Sorry, when I turn wet wood, so that the wet shavings don't get everywhere. And I put an old tablecloth on the floor, which is OSB board in my case. So it's a wooden floor, and I don't want it to get too wet. And the other advantage of having this tablecloth here is all the shavings fall on there, and then I just can fold it up and carry it out of my workshop and dispose of the shavings outside. So that's also nice. The problem is a little bit, you have to be careful with the tablecloth that I put here, wax tablecloth, that you don't slip on it. Okay, so next I added an extension here. That's when I saw what had happened to my step center, and yeah, and on the other side I have a tailstock that comes out quite a bit, so I could get a good distance between the sphere and my tailstock end here. And then I used a sphere turning stick, not a bowl turning. It's wrong. A sphere turning jig to give it the final shape, which was built by another German woodturner yeah, he does that as a hobby as well, and he used to be a metal worker, and he builds these jigs and sells them to other kind of amateur woodturners. So
that jig is available from several sources. I've seen it marketed in a number of places. There's an Australian and a New Zealand version of it as well.
Yeah, I guess that's where he got the idea from. I think he looked on the internet for ideas and then just copied the idea.
Mike Darlow's book has a lot of information about that jig and variations on it.
Mm-hmm. It's quite strong. So, and it works really nice. What I like about it is that this head here can be turned towards the left or towards the right. So if the cutter is horizontal, you actually scrape with the tip, or more or less scrape with the tip. But if you turn it to one side, then you get more of a cut at the tip of the cutter here, or kind of a shearing cut or something like that. I think shearing cut it's called. And that gives a better surface. Of course, if you start turning the head here, you can do only 1/2 of the sphere with this setting. Then you have to come back to the middle, turn it into the other direction, and then you can do the other half. Yeah, and that's the finished sphere then. The day I produced it, it was raining outside, and so it's sphere in the rain.
So is that why you wanted it, to put out in the garden?
I still haven't decided. I put it aside into a thick paper bag so far to let it dry out a little bit more, see whether it's going to split a lot. If there are lots of splits in it, maybe I put it into the garden. Otherwise, maybe I'll find another place where I can use it for decoration. And I've got another sphere that I made with the same jig. It's this one. This is about 22 centimeters, so it's 9 inches, about 9 inches. And that the wood comes from an apple tree, and it's the I think you call it pruning in English. That's where they put the apple tree onto the root of another apple tree, or a twig of an apple tree.
We call it grafting.
Grafting. Okay, grafting. So and after the apple tree didn't carry a lot of apples anymore, it was felled, and someone gave me this this bit of the trunk, and I turned it into a sphere. And you can do that best with using a jig. If you try to do something like that freehand, it's more difficult. So a sphere turning jig is a nice thing to have if you want to make shapes like that.
Yeah. Kai, you're turning satellites, it looks like.
Kai, is that the end of the slideshow?
That's the end of the slideshow, yes.
Okay, I'm going to end the share so that we can see everybody. Okay, comments and questions.
That was great, Kai. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I hadn't seen that jig in action before. I'd only seen pictures of it. Anybody else? Comments, questions?
Carter makes a very small version, and it won't turn anything bigger than like a bocce ball, but they make one too.
That's from Carter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it difficult to trim when you got to the end where it was attached to the lathe itself, being such a large sphere? Was it difficult to get the tail end part? How did you deal with that?
I just sawed it off, and then I used a file and sanding paper to make it round, and also my handheld disc sander. Yeah, I've got kind of the sanding disc that you normally use for sanding the inside and outside of bowls. Yeah, so I use that as well to make it nice and round. So I didn't do that on the lathe because it's really heavy. Then, as John said early on, you have to turn it around and hold it between cup centers so that you can turn away the ends. I do that with smaller spheres, like maybe 4 inches, 5 inches. There it is no problem. But with the big ones, I feel it's safer to do it by hand. And with a big sphere like this, you can kind of judge by eye that you get the shape right. It's not that much of a problem.
I guess the real question is, why does it matter whether it's a really close to perfect sphere versus an oval shape or an egg shape? I mean, you could just freehand it and be done.
You'd
Yeah,
be surprised what the eye can pick up, John.
But I mean, why would you care?
Well, if you're going to go for a sphere and you're slightly off, it's worse than if you go for an egg shape. So it's just like you either get the sphere or you intentionally don't get the sphere. But getting almost to a sphere will make your eye. It will just frustrate the hell out of your eye. It just doesn't look right. So I get what you're saying, but
I think
Since this was turned wet, which in a couple of years will have dried out, and it'll wind up being egg shaped on its own.
yeah, that's right. I mean, I think for me it's just the ambition of a amateur wood turner to get it as
Right.
round as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, and of course you're right. If you turn wet wood, it will eventually be an egg shape and not round anymore. But if you get it almost round in the beginning, it won't be that much of an egg shape later on.
How did you separate the end pieces?
I just cut them off and then sanded them by hand, or kind of shaped them by hand to the right,
Yes.
to the shape of the sphere. So I didn't remount it on the lace for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Kai,
I
trying to
gotta-
show us something.
I just want to show you. I used pretty much the same method, but this is COVID, and it's about 2 inches in diameter and hollowed. I used the same method, but I left a tenon on one end, and then opened up and hollowed the inside. But it's basically the same, and it was my first sphere, to try.
Okay.
And the eye, it's pretty close. I think the eye is pretty close. I mean, it's not machined, but it's good.
Yeah.
Make sure you wash your hands after holding them.
Yeah, Bill, why would you want to turn one of those in this pandemic?
Yeah, I'm not sure it was a good thing to do, but I had to try it, just like you, Kai. I had to see.
I think that's what we always think of COVID. It's around us all the time. So why not in the workshop as well?
I need to give you credit for being a German where precision matters. That's why you wanted it round, right?
maybe. Yeah, maybe I'm kind of pedantic as well.
I have a comment. Can you hear me?
Yeah, who is it?
So
Joe.
with respect to doing it by hand or using a jig, I've done both. I started out turning spheres by hand, and then I got the Vermeck sphere jig. I think it's either New Zealand or Australia, I forget, but the Vermeck, and it's really nice. It's a really solid, really well-made jig. And one of the besides the precision, one of the advantages I've found is I had an order just before, right around Thanksgiving of this past year. One of my clients wanted like 9 or 10 spheres with the Vermeck, and I used all dry wood. All the wood I used was seasoned so that they wouldn't move. And with the Vermeck, I found I was able to knock out a sphere in like 20 minutes. So when you're doing a bunch of them, and these ranged in size from maybe 2.5 inches to like 5 inches. Actually, I have one. I kept one for myself. I liked it so much. But so that's one of the advantages of using a jig is you can knock them out pretty quickly. This one is white oak. So
Joe, what was the function of that ball? Was it a bocce ball or what were you?
No, just decorative. Yeah, okay. I'm thinking of making a little pedestal, like a fancy pedestal for it. But as she wanted, this was on one of my clients. She had bought a bowl from me last Christmas, and she wanted a bunch of spheres, wooden spheres to put in the bowl when she wasn't using it for other stuff.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
How do you spell vermic?
VERMIC, I believe. I have it right here.
Jim Carter has a similar jig too in this country. Carter and Sons.
Yes, they do. I think I've looked at both of them in person. The vermic is, it's very heavy. It's quite substantial, solid steel. It's VERMEC,
Yeah.
and it's two parts here, and this, of course, goes in here. It's a nice tight fit. It's not going in now. But that slides in there. I think I have it.
Yeah, we get it.
Yeah, that slides down there, and then this goes on the headstock.
So the point on the bottom is your center point, right? That point that you're at.
Yes. This comes up to establish the center point. That does go down in there, but it's not going at the moment. And then yeah, it's very, very well made. I definitely recommend it. It's a little pricey, but it's very well made.
When you say more pricey, what do you mean?
It was around 400.
Okay.
400 US.
How did you finish off the ends like Kai did?
With the jig, you can do the far end completely, and then with the end closer to the headstock where it's being held, you just cut it off.
Okay.
If you look in Lucan's book of 1868 and Hotzoffel's book of around 1900, they both describe how to turn spheres in jam chucks.
Yeah. And
you can actually turn a perfect one there. I could turn a croquet ball in 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, I can too.
Years ago, Ernie Conover wrote an article for American Woodworker magazine on turning croquet balls. That could probably be found somewhere on the internet, but it was a really good method.
Yeah, I have a video on it too if you look at the Woodworker Journal playlist on my YouTube channel. But you came to my house to film that one.
I sure remember. We were both a lot younger then.
Oh, we were a hell.
Yeah, the flash powder in the camera always caused a problem too, right?
Okay, since Ernie's on there, I'm going to go over to Ernie in a second. Before I do, I see there's some faces on here who I don't quite recognize. So if you guys who have come here, however you got the link, if you send me an email, I'll put you on the list. And my email is johnkelsey@gmail.com, but it don't have a Y on my name. It's JOHNKELSE@gmail. So send me an email. I'll put you on our regular mailing list. We send out a mailing on Wednesdays to promote this meeting every week. Okay, I'm going to give it over to Ernie now, if that's okay with you guys. You ready to go, Ernie?
I am.
All right, I'm going to put the spotlight on you, although that's not necessary when you get the share going.
Okay, my last article for Woodworkers Journal, I decided to do an article on bowl-gouge grinds and kind of the history of them. And it was one of those deals, the deeper I went, the further back I went. And again, I went to Lucan's book of 1868 and went to Hotzoffel. The first real mention of a bowl-gouge is in Lucan's book, but he just says that the Woodturners around Tunbridge reground big, deep gouges, spindle gouges to do the work, and doesn't really say much more. However, you come forward to Haynes' book of 1957, and you very clearly see a bowl gouge. It was a Sorby. I have an identical one that I bought in the 60s. And it was a forged steel gouge. And the first real high-speed one was developed by Henry Taylor and released in 1976, I believe. And I was able to find a Roy Taylor, who's the son of Peter Child, or Roy Child, that's the son of Peter Child, who wrote the book of 1971, The Craftsman Woodturner. and he very definitely calls it a bowl gouge. So without further ado, here's my video showing all these different grinds and gouges. Let me share screen here, and there's the video. All right, I'm going to start it. Hi, I'm Ernie Conifer. Welcome to my shop. I'd like to spend a few minutes today talking about bowl gouge grinds. There's quite a few different patterns out in the marketplace today being touted by various turners, and I'd like to try to demystify this for you a bit. I'd now like to stroll over to the grinder and show you how to grind each of these grinds. This will help you to actually see which grind is best for you. This is a Sorby forged carbon steel bowl gouge that I bought in my youth. It was made sometime in the 1960s, and it is well described in Frank Payne's book of 1957, although he did not call it a bowl gouge, simply a large spindle gouge that was ground in a different way. It was ground to about a 40-degree angle and the same bevel all the way around, with the face being square. Later, most of us learned that by sloping this face back about 15 degrees, you could go inside a bowl a little better, but it's a simple grind that was easy to do. The way we did it at that time was to put a platform rest here and adjust it such that we grind a 40-degree angle on this gouge. And we would simply put that against the gouge and slowly rotate it like that, doing our utmost to keep it absolutely square. It is still a grind that actually works quite well, and it's very easy to do with minimal grinding equipment. We're going to point it just a little bit uphill, and it's ground to 40 degrees, so that is the angle it will cut at. If you sight that nose angle in the direction you want to cut is parallel up the side of this bowl blank, we're going to put it right in like that. Get it cutting. I've got the nose bevel rubbing now. I'm going to turn it a little until it cuts sweet. A little bit uphill is best with it. And you can see this is going nice as pie. If I want it to cut deeper, I'm going to swing it towards you. If I want it to cut shallower, I'm going to swing it away from you. Just like that. Grinding jigs have greatly simplified the grinding of all turning tools, but especially gouges. This is become the universal jig amongst turners, and it uses a movable pocket right here with an articulated holder that allows us to grind a tool very easily and very precisely. Moving the pocket back and forth changes the nose grind angle of the gouge. Moving the strut up and down changes the angle of the side grind in relation to the nose grind. This is the 40-40 grind, so named because the cutting edge is raked back at about a 40-degree angle in side view, and the edge is more or less 40 degrees. It is exactly 40 degrees here and about 40 degrees on each side. And about is the key word here. It might be 38, it might be 42, but it doesn't matter much. A very useful tool for checking all this is an inexpensive protractor to put two 40-degree lines here, and we can fairly easily do a 40-40 grind. And this is I think, interesting to people who would like to try bowl turning, but they don't particularly want to put a couple $100 into some jigs to do it with. So with just a simple platform that'll get you 40 degrees on the nose like this, drawing up 2 lines like this, we can now come in like this and roll the gouge as we come around, and then come over here, touch right there like that, and come back like this. I'll do it in real time now. So I've got it parallel to that line. I'm touching here. And I'm going to come right here like that. The 40-40 grind can also be done with the Wolverine jig and the Varigrind holder, although you will have to put the strut at kind of a weird angle to get the side grind right. But there we have 40 on the nose and we have about 40 on the sides. All we have to do is start up the grinder. Just walk it around nice and high. And there we have a 40-40 grind off the Wolverine jig. 40-40 grind, which I've shown you 2 ways to grind it. And again, if we sight along that nose bevel, it will go right up the side of the bowl. So we have to hold it at about that 40 degrees to this face. The fact that it's swept back 40 degrees also gives you a much longer cutting edge. So when your skills get to the point where you can really make this gouge sing, you can take a much heavier chip. So again, I'm going to come in here with a scrape cut. The flute's pointing to about 9:30, 10 o'clock. There's my start. And once I've got this nose bevel registered, I'm going to rotate it until the cut goes sweet. And again, I'm going to now swing it if I want to go shallow this direction. If I want to go deeper, I'm going to swing it towards you. It'll run with one hand if everything's right. It's a very nice grind. If you're just learning, a good trick is to just hold 2 fingers on the gouge so you're only holding it down and not pulling it with the left hand. For all the control of this gouge is by getting the nose bevel rubbing. That prevents it from being drawn into the end grain. If we tried to do it this way, it would be a disaster. And so we start the cut, we rotate the tool so it cuts sweetly, and it just goes along. So if you do it with just 2 fingers like this, you will get nice cuts if you're doing it right, and you will learn to make your dominant hand the control hand. In the 1980s, the Irish guilds, who had a strong local turning guild organization throughout Ireland that was well networked, developed a grind in which the cutting edge or face of the tool was raked back considerably more than 40 degrees. And that has become known as the Irish grind. With the one-way Wolverine system, and what they call their Varigrind jig, I simply call it a gooseneck jig, but with that we can very easily grind either a 40-40 grind or this Irish grind. And to do it, we just start up that grinder and just come right around like this. Now we'll take a look at the Irish grind. Again, we're going to take that nose bevel, and that is the direction this wants to cut. So it has to be held about like this. And we want this so that if we put this level on the tool rest, it's at about the center of our hole. So I'm right there. And again, start the same way, scrape cut, flute pointed to about 9:30, 10 o'clock. If we were making an inside cut, it would be to about 2 to 2:30. There's the cuts on flute. A drawback to either the 40-40 grind or the Irish grind is that inside a bowl, as you come down the wall like this, and come around this curve to create the bottom of the bowl, the heel of the bevel will actually drive us off course. As you try to come around here, the bevel will force the tip up and off, and you'll not be able to get the curve that you want in there. So again, in the 1980s sometime, most of us started to take that fresh from the Wolverine jig, and we would simply by eye grind a secondary bevel on here. And you can see that I have, it's lighter here and it comes around and gets bigger here. But I can now, by sort of rounding that corner right there in the heel of the bevel, I can come down the wall of the bowl and around a much tighter curve and across the bottom without being driven up and off our intended course by the heel of the bevel. Now we could go to the same grind, the Irish grind, but with a secondary bevel on it. I won't even put a handle on it, but it cuts just about the same. The first high-speed steel bowl gouge was released to the public in 1976 by the Henry Taylor Company. They built it in collaboration with Roychild. They still make this gouge. This one is of recent manufacture. Cutting theory says that the edge for faceplate work, where you're going against the grain twice a revolution, would be best at about 45 degrees, let's say between 40 and 45 degrees. And a problem with the normal pocket jig, where we put this essentially in the center of the grinding wheel and roll that, is we'll get a steeper angle at the side no matter what we do. So Johannes Michelson, who is the first guy to think of turning wood hats, has come up with what he calls the vector jig. And we have a plate which has 3 holes center. You can sharpen spindle gouges on this hole, but for bowl gouges, you use the outboard holes here, and you do the right side of the gouge off of that hole, and the left side of the gouge from just beyond the tip over this way with the left hole. And then you come here and you can very handily grind a secondary bevel on the tool. And you can finally come here and grind what Johannes calls a tertiary bevel or third bevel. And that gives you a very nice sweep through here that allows you to go around sharp corners. It's a lovely grind. I've come to pretty much use it exclusively for my gouges. Michelson grind, which gives you closer to 45 degrees, but it's still pretty much an Irish grind, but with a secondary and a tertiary bevel. Very little tear out, which is when you go against the grain here in faceplate work, it's pretty common to damage the grain, either bend it or tear it out. So a good sharp gouge really eliminates that problem. I might also add that a common spindle gouge can be used to turn, but you would not use it like this, or you dig into these and create the rough patch from hell and probably rip the piece off the faceplate. But if we use it thoughtfully, and we can do that by putting this down like this, and again, we have the bevel trailing behind the cut. And you can see I'm getting beautiful shaving. And I'm not taking very much off. I'm just following the contours that I created with the bowl gouge. And I always quip that it's not if you sand, it's how much you sand. But with that little, what I call a trick cut, you pretty much eliminate the need for sanding. You can do the same cut on the inside, but you can only get to about here. You can't come around the corner with it, but that's where all the rough patches happen, is on the inside of the bowl, right down in this area right here. That same cut on the outside can be done with a bowl gouge by, again, raising your rest a little bit and laying this tool down on its side like this, so the bevel rubs, and sort of turn it down until it just starts to cut. And we can now bring that right along. And you can see I'm taking one continuous ribbon of material off of here. What I call the trick cut. But again, for a final finishing cut, it is safe as long as that bevel is rubbing behind the cut. But look what I'm rewarded with. Well, I hope this demonstration has helped you to decide on what you want to do. There's a lot more information in the article that is in concert with this video. And so pick up a copy, give it a read, and above all, be safe and have fun.
Well done, Ernie. That was brilliant.
Thanks so much.
Very good.
Thanks, Ernie.
Very good.
Yep.
Some years ago, I drew a cartoon about bowl gouge grinds. So there's grind. I'll send a PFD of it to John. He can put it out in the show notes.
Ernie, I've got a question. It's Doug here. You didn't say anything about the inside of the flute. I noticed on a bunch of gouges you can get all sorts of different shapes as on the inside of the flute. And how much does that influence the grind that you're making?
I've wrestled with that problem for years, and a lot of turners are very picky about it. I know a very famous turner that would only use the parabolic flute that Roy Child originally developed with Henry Taylor, but then he got his own brand of gouges out made by a different manufacturer, and so he became less picky about the shape of the flutes. But I think once you can turn well enough, you can adjust to any flute shape. But I find the parabolic, fairly deep parabolic, to probably be the best because it's easier to grind it to a nice shape.
Thanks.
Okay, anybody else? Questions and comments?
I have a, when you're resharpening using a diamond stone on a gouge, do you have to do the inside at all, or just pass on the outside? And what do you leave behind, Ernie? Is there like a small burr from the diamond?
If I'm going to, on all my spindle tools, I bring them to the same level of sharpness I would bench tools, that my plane irons or my dovetailing chisels, but I use a buffer to do that. And if for bowl gouges, I don't feel they work as well when you take the burr off as when you leave it on. So I just take them straight from the grinder.
Right. That's what I do, and I thought maybe a professional would take some extra step there.
No, it's just, and to me, sharpening should take the least time possible. I don't want to fool with it. It's just an impediment. I have 7 or 8 bowl gouges, and I grind them all at one time and just stack them up until they're all dull, and then start over again.
So you don't hone that edge at all?
None, no.
Do you hone skews? Do you hone anything?
Oh, yes. All my faceplate tools are as sharp as a bench tool. They're at a mirror polish edge.
But you don't do that with the bowl gouge?
No.
Talking about honing, I recall, I believe it was Alan Lacer, did a rather extensive study on honing a bowl gouge, whether it worked better, yes or no. A lot of microscopic, high resolution pictures of the edge and so forth. And that's about probably 10 years ago or so. It's in the AAW, I would think, in their archives.
It is.
But the conclusion was that the time spent on honing really doesn't save you any time, doesn't make the bowl gouge cut much better. It's just as quick to go off the grinder and go with it.
Well, there's a few of us have even theorized that maybe the burr is doing some of the work there, and taking it off makes it cut worse, but we've never been able to prove that. Yeah. And of course, whether you're cutting dry wood or wet wood makes a hell of a difference, because wet wood has really got a lubricant in the wood, and that makes a hell of a difference, as we know from metalworking.
Beginner question or a novice question. Detail gouge, what is that? I think I bought one at one of the shows from Trent, I think, and I cannot cut with that bastard.
A detail gouge was really invented by Jerry Glazer, and it is a spindle gouge milled out of a round bar and with a very shallow flute that sits high in the gouge. And it allows you to grind a very long fingernail, what I call a high society grind, without breaking through at the wings of the grind. But they really are kind of my favorite gouge for detail work. In fact, our local producer here in Cleveland, Doug Thompson, makes a gouge which he attributes to me, but it isn't me. It was Jerry Glazer's idea.
Kai is asking to speak here. Kai?
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the honing. There is one cut that you can do right on the, oh, can you see that?
Hold it back to your face, Kai.
Yeah, okay. Now I turn it a little bit. You can make a cut right on the side of the gouge here. And if I do this, then I hone it. Otherwise, I won't hone it. I just turn it around here. It's even a bit steeper, the angle here. And if you want to get a shaving right here, it's cutting really nicely when it's honed. Otherwise, I wouldn't hone it. I don't know whether Ernie has any comment to this.
No, I've never tried tying it, but I will. I'll try when I do that. I did that cut in the end of that series with the bowl gouge on its side, where I used the side to make a final cut. Mm-hmm. I'll try it. It might work better in that case, because my spindle gouge is razor sharp.
Okay, but as I said, I only use that for final cuts, and if I cut on the kind of upcoming slope there, or whatever you call it,
yeah, one of the wings of the
wings. Yeah, that's it. The wings. Yeah.
To your point on honing, Ernie, and Kai, I've often thought that last cut you made Ernie, was actually almost like a skew cut, but because the angle you're holding, because the chisel has got that angle that you can hold it, you can actually control it on a bowl, on the outside of a bowl. So it's, It's a very steep, but it's also almost like a sheer skew.
Yes, I always say to students, it's almost like you had a saw and you're sawing through the grain.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, shearing it off from underneath.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay.
Harvey.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question, Ernie. When you're sharpening the detail gouge, what angles do you want to be looking at, and what shape is best to do that?
I rake them back as far as I can go. I grind to about no more than 30, but I'm usually at about 25 degrees. Let me grab one off the table. There's mine, which you can see it's got a pretty good angle back on it. This is more of a spindle gouge. For a detail gouge, it'd have a longer, but even my roughing out gouge, you can see how steep I make that. This one's at about 25 degrees.
Ernie, can you show the other one again, please? The first one?
Yeah. Why don't you grind the heel off of that for that one? Why don't you grind the heel off?
Because it's a spindle gouge and I don't need to.
I find it better to do.
Huh, I'll give it a try.
What brand is that, Ernie?
This is a D-Way, which is made out in Seattle.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? Questions?
Yeah, regarding honing, I was just going to say that I hone quite a bit between sharpenings. Like I use either a diamond or a CBN hone. This is the a small CBN hone I have that's 600 on one side and 1,000 on another. And I just you know, touch up my bowl gouges between actual sharpenings, and I find it helps a lot.
So you
never hone the inside. You never hone the flute, do you?
No, I don't. No, I just the wings.
Something I might add is with a lot of new gouges, I go in with a very narrow buffing wheel and buff the flute for the length of the gouge so that it's shiny and nice, and that saves me a lot of time later on.
Mm-hmm. What do you think that does?
Well, theoretically, a sharp edge is two surfaces meeting perfectly, and having all those gouges are milled, that flute is milled in there, and the cutters, as they wear, leave some roughness to that surface, and you're now bringing it down to you know, somewhere around a 16 micro finish, and it's going to be a better surface to mate with.
Yeah. Does anybody strop their tools using leather strop?
You can with a Tormac machine, and a lot of people sharpen with Tormac machines, so it would be easy to do on a Tormac.
I have a leather strop that I use on my skew. That's the only one that I use it on.
I've often made leather strops too for special sharpenings, because you can wrap the leather around a piece of wood you hog out to the shape you need, and you can charge them with about 180 grit valve grinding compound, which is a wonderful abrasive that gets finer as it wears. So it's a good way to make a quick and dirty leather strop for almost nothing.
You could also use a wooden dowel, just like a poplar wooden dowel. Like if you wanted a round, it doesn't have to be leather. You can just charge a wooden dowel with like the green grinding compound and use that.
Yeah, that would work just as well.
Well, we're up to 11 o'clock, and we normally stop here, but today, for those of you who would like to try, I have set up 3 breakout rooms, which I'll activate.